welcome back our solo co-host today. The flu's claiming everybody else. Matt Harvey, good morning, sir.
Last person standing. I'll probably get super sick this weekend.
I hope not.
I hope not either.
Yeah, I mentioned I gotten a flu shot this fall, and so far I've been healthy. It's the longest streak of healthiness over the course of a winter I've ever had, I think. And I know some people get the flu shot and get the flu anyway. It's got about a 50-50 chance of working for you in any given year.
I do the old-fashioned flu shot. I go and eat ramps.
Does it work for you?
Yeah. No? I'm here.
Good for you.
I'm here. I made it through.
Let's welcome in our next guest. You know him from his other job, Dr. Tyler Long, out of the Berkeley County School System. He heads the CARES Academy. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Don't really know anything about eating ramps or anything, but I will tell you that I rarely get sick. But this year I've been sick 3 times in the last 6 weeks. So it's been a fun winter and spring for this guy.
Yeah, because we were going to have you a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, got sick the night before. It was fun.
Is my mic on?
Yes.
I assume that the people in your book that's what they were doing. They were looking for ramps to dig.
Yeah, probably so. That's what I'm thinking. That was the quest to get to the top of Everest for those delicious ramps.
This book is called Expedition to the Unknown, the 1924 British expedition to Mount Everest. And this is before the summit had ever been climbed successfully, known at least anyway. We were kind of joking earlier, the mountain's been around for millions of years, so who knows who may have climbed it and who would know.
Exactly. Well, the mountain itself is 29,032 feet. In fact, when they first mapped it, they mapped it at 29,000 feet right on the dot, and they thought that no one would believe them that it actually was a perfect 29,000 feet. So they added the extra 2 feet onto it, and then over the course of the years it's grown about 30 feet for whatever reason, mathematical wise.
It's actually grown, do you think? Or
I'm sure it probably grows slightly over time, but
better measurements.
Yeah, I would go with better measurements, Rob.
Is it truly the tallest peak, or is K2? Is it K2 the other one that's?
That's a great question. I believe that Everest is the tallest peak in the world. I do not have the measurements of K2 on me, so I'm not exactly sure. But at this time, Everest was basically, as what Mallory and Irvin found out, was it was the great quest. Mallory was obsessed with Everest, but pre-1921, it was a mountain he had never even seen.
Mm-hmm. And this is George Mallory, who is English.
Yes, George Mallory and Andrew Sandy Irvin. They're both English. Mallory, father of 3, professor, educated, very well off, courtesy of his father-in-law. Irvin, a little different. He was the expedition Superman. He may have been dyslexic, possibly having a learning disability, but he was a mechanical savant, and that's the thing that makes him special, and that is why I believe that Mallory ultimately chose him. And the unique thing about Irvin is while he was a rower at Oxford, he also was coming off a scandalous, torrid love affair with his best friend's stepmother, who was married to a much older steel magnate, which really...
Boy, if the Jerry Springer show was around back then.
Caused a lot of problems with society back then, and also his family. So in some ways, he was looking to try to get away from that.
Mm-hmm. Well, he got away.
Yeah. Well, in fact, on his what he didn't know was on his climb up the mountain, that particular lady's husband was filing for divorce in court.
Yeah. He never would have found out.
No.
This was an ill-fated expedition.
Correct.
In 1924. There were other attempts just before that involving Mallory to climb this mountain to its peak.
Yes.
But the thing about this 24 expedition is we don't know if they made it or not.
Yeah, it's a great mystery. After June 8th, fellow climber who was shadowing them some 2,000 feet below, Noel Odell, he spots them at 1250. He believes that they are climbing up and over the infamous second step and on their way to the summit. However, a snowstorm rolls in. Some people even think it was a blizzard. The men are never seen again. Alive, that is.
Now, you also in the book go through the various theories as to why or why not they may have actually ascended the peak. You want to talk about a couple of those?
Sure. Well, first of all, To get to the peak of Everest, you have to go over the second step. The second step is 28,250 feet up. It's straight up 130 feet, with the top 16 feet being just a sheer straight up mountain peak cliff. It was believed at that time that there was no way that those men could have made it up and over that. However, Conrad Anker, who found Mallory in 1999, and many people on that expedition for National Geographic now have come to the belief that maybe Irvin couldn't have gotten over it because he was a novice at climbing. But Mallory, essentially, they believe it was very well in his scope of climbing ability to get up and over that mountain.
So if he got up and over the second step, how much further would he have had to go to get to the peak?
The second step is roughly a couple hundred feet from the summit. It comes upon the third step, which is essentially about 50 feet from the summit. But the first and third steps are very mundane. The second step is the one that you have to get up and over, and it is the difficult challenge even for a modern climber.
And now there are ladders built into that second step. Back then, of course,
Correct.
there were not.
The Chinese in 1975 modernized that step and have several aluminum ladders. Those were fixed in the early 2000s as well. So there is no real climbing at that point. You're using a series of modernized ladders. And they have those throughout Everest now to go over crevasses and large holes that you could fall several thousand feet to your death.
You don't want to.
No, you don't.
So what is the evidence, circumstantial evidence, that Mallory and Irvin may have made the summit?
Well, it is all circumstantial, unfortunately. The big belief is this. George Mallory told anyone and everybody that if he got to the summit, he would place a photograph of his wife, Ruth, and their 3 kids on the summit. Now, look, even if he did make the summit, that photograph is long gone, even if he buried it under 5 feet of snow. However, when he was found in 1999, several things were found on him. Notes to various people, his brother and sister, and a female friend. I don't really know about the significance of the female friend, but
old
you know where
habits
that
are hard
could go.
to...
But also...
Strictly platonic.
Yeah, but also as well... that photo was never found. Now, other photos were found in his possession. Other photos were found in his possessions at camp, but that photo is nowhere to be found.
So that theory is the speculation as to why he may have actually made it to the summit.
That, along with other subsequent climbs that have proved that it is possible for a man like Mallory.
Now, you said
Where
Mallory...
was he found?
And 75 years later is the
Yes.
key part of
But,
it.
yeah, where was he found?
Okay, great question. So he was found in 1999, several thousand feet to the east. So he is several thousand feet to the east of where Noel Adele had last saw him. So that proves that he was descending the mountain. Now, we don't know if he summited or not, but he was clearly coming down the mountain. And another thing is they believe that he was summiting at nightfall because an essential thing, and in fact, Edward Norton found this out 2 days before, is you must wear snow goggles on any mountain, but including Everest, to fight off snow blindness. He had those in his pocket. They're an essential element if you're climbing in the daytime. So if he has them in his pocket, the common theory is they're descending at night. Most people, including me, believe that they summited late in the evening, close to nightfall, and they met their death coming down the mountain in the darkness.
What is the significance of a Kodak camera in this story?
Great question. So Sandy Irvin, particularly, is known or thought to have a Kodak camera that Howard Somerville, another member of the expedition, handed him to photograph the climb up the mountain. Kodak has stated that if that camera is ever found, because of the extreme conditions on Everest, there is a 50-50 chance that they can produce those images, and you could possibly find out if the men ever did make it to the summit. When they found Mallory in 1999, at first they were ecstatic because they thought they found Irvin, because he would ultimately have the camera. But after searching Mallory, we don't do this these days, but or at least I don't. But back then they had their name stitched in their clothing, so it was very clear, other than looking at him, that it was George Mallory. They searched him. There is no camera with him. So the camera is believed to be with Irvin, who unfortunately is probably at the glacier at the bottom of the mountain.
And the only thing we ever found of Irvin is what?
Well, in 2024, a man named Jimmy Chin went on an expedition of Everest for National Geographic. They found his foot inside a boot. And they know it's his foot because when they found the sock that the foot was in, well, his name's stitched on the sock.
God.
Thankfully.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, that is being processed right now for DNA testing. The Irvin family has agreed to that. So I think we will see in the next year. I don't have any clue why anyone else would be wearing his socks, but that it probably is his foot.
You never know. Somebody could have found his body and took him off out of necessity, or
Yeah, you could have. In fact, and I've alluded to it in my book, the Chinese have climbed Everest several times. They believe that they saw Irvin's body in 1960 and 1965, and he was in a little enclave. He had kind of sheltered up for the night. He had severe frostbite, obviously, all over him, and he died, obviously, of the extreme conditions.
And
well, how did who's the Mallory?
So,
How did he die? Did he fall, or is it known?
I believe that they make it down the third step. They try to make it down the second step. Irvin is lowered by Mallory. Mallory is then hip belayed down to the second step by Mallory. But Mallory falls. Mallory doesn't die, but when he is found in 1999, he has several serious injuries, and one is possible broken ribs. So the men are hurt, they're injured, but they know they're dead if they don't keep moving. They get to the bottom of the first step, no problem. It's here that they make a bad decision and choose the wrong set of gullies to get off the mountain. We can look at that and say, oh my God, what a horrible decision. But when you're the first to do something, when you're the first to ascend the mountain, and then essentially the first to descend the mountain in darkness, you don't really know where you're going. And it's here that I think that Mallory fell, whether it's because of exhaustion, darkness, or just human error. But when Mallory is found in 1999, he has a rope tied around him, and the men were tied together by a small cotton rope. It was about 30 feet, and Mallory's rope is broke or cut off about 6 feet out. I believe it probably got caught on some rocks. Irvin probably tried to save him, but Mallory tumbled down the mountain to his death. Mallory does not die right away, most people think, because he has an extreme compound fracture in his right leg just above the ankle, but his left leg is over his right leg, almost in a protective position. And most people also equate the bruising, which the bruising, apparently from what I've read, takes about 20 minutes for a good bruise to heal. So he would have to have been alive during that time. Most people think he dies maybe within a few minutes, but max 30 minutes later after the fall.
brutal way to go out.
It is.
You mentioned that.
And then his buddy is just left to his own and
Well,
trying to get off the mountain.
the great or morbid thing about Everest is the conditions are so horrible. It's negative 40 degrees most days there with the wind. When they find Mallory, he's perfectly preserved. He's almost marble. His clothes are torn, but they're on. They check him for artifacts. They give him a proper Anglican burial. And then about 10 days later, they think, oh, crap, we never checked for the camera. So they go back, they exhume the body, and a man named Tom Pollard, who has an awesome YouTube show and an awesome podcast about his expeditions on Everest, he goes underneath Mallory with the help of another gentleman who lifts up his legs and takes a picture of Mallory's actual face. And he says that it's just like he's sleeping. He looks exactly like he did in 1924, stubble on the face, but he does have a large head wound right above his left eye.
Now, last year was 100 years since they tried this expedition. There's controversy over the selection of Irvin as a climbing partner, a mountaineer for Mallory. Why is that controversial?
Well, most people believe that the proper person would have pick would have been Noel Odell. He was a seasoned climber like Mallory. He's a veteran climber. Irvin himself has no high altitude climbing experience. Yeah, he had done some things such as he had climbed some local mountains in Britain, which are a couple thousand feet. He also had climbed some mountains such as the ones we have in Harper's Ferry that are a couple hundred feet high. He'd never been any high altitude experience. But the thing about Mallory and Irvin is Mallory selected Irvin, I believe, for a couple reasons. Number one, he's a mechanical savant. Everyone at that time was starting to come around to the use of oxygen for a climb. Prior to that, oxygen was almost looked at as steroids were in 1990s baseball. But Mallory had started to come around to that. Irvin was wonderful at that. In fact, when they found Camp 6 after their death, there were mechanical devices all over that. Irvin was extremely intelligent. He, in fact, out of his dorm room and his bedroom when he was younger during World War I, would make suggestions on war equipment and weapons for the British government and would send those designs to the War Department. So that is one reason why he chose him. Number one, he was great, and he was his right-hand man with those devices. The second reason is he's so much younger than Mallory, and while Mallory was a married man, Mallory, I think, at this time would give his life to climb Everest. And he knew
he did.
Well, yes, he did. But
Indeed.
and he knew that a much more experienced climber such as Odell would have probably put the brakes on some of that stuff. Like, we're not taking these chances. Whereas Irvin is so young, I think Irvin looks up to Mallory, and he's going to do basically whatever Mallory says in this situation.
Mallory had tried in 21 and 22 and come close, and that's the reason why this is thought to be almost like a suicide journey to the top for him.
I believe it was, yes. I believe he was obsessed with it. He had gotten close in 22, up to about 28,000 feet. 21 was more of a reconnaissance mission. In fact, in 22, Mallory led a gang of Sherpas up the mountain, and unfortunately an avalanche hit, and 7 of those were brought to their death, fell to their death. Mallory actually falls 150 feet and with some minor injuries, but he cheats death that time.
Not the next time.
No, he doesn't.
So they are seen going up the mountain by Odell, and that's the last they are ever seen.
Correct.
And that was how many feet from the summit?
About 800 feet.
Oh, man.
Yeah. They're about 800 feet from the summit when he sees them.
And in regards to searching for the two in the aftermath of them not returning to their base camp, what was that like?
So Odell is actually the one who heads the search. Odell is actually very important here because he stays in the death zone for almost 2 weeks.
What is the death zone?
So the death zone is essentially anything above 26,000 feet on Everest. At that point, you're slowly dying. Necrosis sets in, which is severe frostbite to the nose, the cheeks, the toes, the fingers. They basically become black leather, and they either fall off or you have to have them amputated, as we saw in 1996.
With Into Thin Air,
Yes.
that movie in Everest.
Yes, that one gentleman lost his hands, he lost his nose, he lost, I believe, some of his toes. But also, too, hypernecrosis sets in as well, and that's a simple thing. The way that Tyler Long can describe it is it takes longer to do ordinary things because you're getting less oxygen to your brain. I've heard climbers describe it as a simple way of this. I know I have to tie my shoe. It takes 5 seconds for my brain to tell my body, let's tie my shoe. On Everest or on any mountain, if I was to do that, I'd be sitting there looking at my shoe 10 minutes later because I just don't have the functionability to tie it.
If this mission in 24 is, at this point, it's impossible because no one's ever done it.
Correct.
That we are aware of, right? If this mission is good for anything, it is good for future routes that are taken to get up Everest. But there's a delay between 24 and 33 for 9 years as to whether or not a European can attempt this
That's
again.
correct. So John Noel, who was on the expedition, he actually paid £8,000 for the rights to the photography and the, I'll call it, movie of the expedition. He actually creates a movie in 1924. And in the promotion of said movie, he really does a disservice to the Tibetan monks and the Tibetan people. He kind of views them as cannibals, and really degrades them. And for that reason, the Lama puts a squash on any climbing for the next decade. You're not allowed in the country. And if you're not allowed in Tibet at that time, you can't climb because you can't get through Nepal at that time because foreigners aren't allowed through there. They blame it on another man who was doing some scouting and some surveying for the expedition. And his last name is Van Hazard, and he is the scapegoat for the next 50 years for that, essentially. That's until the 70s, it doesn't come out as why they really weren't allowed up there.
Because of the ultimately, I guess, potentially failed route. We don't know if they technically made it or not in 1924.
Correct.
Another route is taken that becomes a much more successful route for Sir Edmund Hillary and his Sherpa.
Correct. That is on the other side of the mountain. It is a difficult route. You do have to get up and over the Hillary Step. And the Hillary Step, unfortunately, was actually destroyed during the earthquake in said avalanche, probably about a decade ago.
And this mission by Hillary was in 53.
Yes, 53.
And he becomes, and this was very important for the English, that they'd be the first to get to the summit.
Yes, it is very important. And in fact, even in 21, 22, and 24, it's a matter of national pride. You know, you're coming off World War I, which basically decimated their population. They failed at the North Pole and the South Pole, and it's a matter of national pride to conquer this mountain. And many of the men, I must say, they are extreme warriors. You know, these guys had all been in, well, not all of them. 60% of them had been in World War I. Mallory was an artilleryman, while Irvin was too young for World War I. Many of these men had been through hell, through trench warfare. There was nothing that the mountain is going to throw at them that, I don't want to say scared, but that's going to really faze them. So they're willing to take chances, and it is a matter of national pride for these guys to get to the top.
Kind of like Americans with the moon.
Yeah, well, essentially, yeah. I mean, really, because after you conquer Everest, where is there to conquer other than outer space?
The moon?
Yeah.
Right?
And we did it.
The next highest spot, I guess, is
Yeah.
the moon.
Yeah.
Right?
Look out, Mars. We're coming.
Well, that's what Elon says.
Got about a minute left, Tyler. Tell people about this book.
So, the book is Expedition to the Unknown. It is available on my website, which is tylermlong.com. And also, as well, it is available on Amazon. It's a passion project for me. Anyone who knows me knows that I love history. While this is not American history, it's world history. And I love these guys. I became acquainted with this story in the late 90s. It's always been something I've kept up with. And I think it's one of the great mysteries. And in many cases, it's sad because at least Mallory, as you said, was really on a suicide mission.
And he left behind a wife and 3 children.
Wife and 3 children.
Tyler, it's a fascinating read. I wish you the best of luck with the book. And, man, I'll tell you what, it's hard to put this one down once you start reading it. It's unusual when you know the ending of a book that you want to keep reading it, but
Yeah.
this one you know the ending in advance and you're trying to fill in the story along the way.
And you know, Rob, I don't know if we'll ever know if they climbed to the top or not. I just don't think we'll ever solve that mystery.
And we'll end it on that. Tyler, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Tyler Long, and 9:30. If you're listening to this live in the morning, on the replay, it'll be 5:30.